It is time for the only correct power rankings.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
Alright, let's run through these. We have the race for Sam Maguire, we have the race for the Tailteann Cup heating up at the moment. We bring you from county number 32 to county number 1. In at number 32.
Mike's on there, Colin. Yeah.
Oh.
That was lucky.
Colin,
I can't believe he asked me that stupid question at the end there.
He usually goes effing and blinding into the box. The one day he doesn't.
How about those stupid questions, eh?
He manages to keep the mic hot. Number 32 is Waterford. They were beaten by Wicklow in the Tailteann Cup. London, unlucky enough in their match against Sligo at the weekend, had a penalty saved in the second period of extra time. They were 2-point losers in that game. They're down to 31. Laois had a poor season and their year is done. They're down to 30. The thing is, on the weekend against Westmeath, they lost by 3 points, and they were 3 points up in the second half of this game. They had an extra man, and then they got a man sent off themselves. If that hadn't happened, it could have been a situation where Laois could have turned the season on its head. But really, when you look back on it, you'd have to say it was a very, very disappointing season. Wicklow were beaten by Offaly well at the weekend. They're down to 29, and Tipperary are one of the big fallers this week. They're down to 28th after that defeat to Carlow. Big upset, possibly the upset of the weekend really. Robbie Kiley and Bill Maher were missing for Tip, but they should be better than Carlow. They hammered them earlier in the year in the league, and David Power, speaking afterwards, couldn't really put his finger on what has exactly happened since the league final. It wouldn't have taken a huge turn of events for them to possibly win that league final against Cavan and Croke Park not so long ago, and now they've been dumped out by Carlow in the Tailteann Cup. Antrim dumped out by Leitrim from the Tailteann Cup, and Enda McGinley has stepped down. A couple of good results in the league earlier this year, doesn't feel that long ago, but it was a disappointing end to the season. One of my favourite moments from this game at the weekend was Pat Shivers of Antrim, another great GA name. He kicked a great score off his left boot, and the boot went flying, you know, like what happened to you at school, and the boot almost went over the bar as well. Pat Shivers himself got sent off eventually late in the game. They were beaten by 5 points by Leitrim. Again, that's a result that we did not call. I think it's fair to say we got to put our hands up and say credit to Andy Moore and his team on that one. Longford stayed put at 26. They lost it for Fermanagh. Carlow, one of the big risers then after that win against Tip. Didn't see that coming either, to be honest. They were hammered by Louth in Leinster by 15 points, and then firstly out in the Tailteann Cup get a win against Tipperary to kickstart their season. Wexford were narrowly beaten this time by Offaly. They beat them in the Leinster Championship, and then Offaly got their revenge. They're down to 24th, and then Sligo up to 23rd. Now, I did say earlier on that London possibly could have won that game against Sligo. Sligo did have an extraordinary tally of wides in that game, so they might feel that they should be better than 2-point winners against London. But winning is all that matters, and that's 2 wins in the championship for them this year so far for them. But none of the teams that they've beaten are actually Irish teams. New York and London, the teams that have gone down to Sligo, so they're still alive in that competition. And then Leitrim up to 22nd, and I would say to you, if you don't think that the Tailteann Cup matters, watch the footage of Leitrim's second goal against Antrim at the weekend, and when they score it, a Leitrim man stands over an Antrim man going yeah, and one of the Antrim fellas kicks out at the player celebrating, and it didn't quite lead to any sort of brawl or anything like that, but I was like, this is championship right there, goading and kicking out. That's what you want to see. Leitrim 22nd, down 21st, down a spot. Like they played Monaghan and Cavan this year in the championship, and they've lost both games. You wouldn't expect them to win either game, and despite all the issues that clearly have been going on behind the scenes there, even if things were right there, you'd still might have favoured Monaghan and Cavan in those games. Offaly then up to 20th, playing a lot of young lads, it seems. John Mahan making the point that they're taking this competition very seriously because it's a huge competition for the likes of the young players of Offaly. He said that they're using it as a foundation. Like he mentioned, some of the younger players that they've played, Morgan Tynan, Cathal Flynn, Jack Bryant and Keith O'Neill, and he says it's a great competition for them and an opportunity for them to play alongside the likes of Niall McNamee. So blending experience and youth is what Mahan is doing. An 8-point win against Wicklow. Fermanagh up to 19th after their win in the Tailteann Cup against Longford. They had Ultan Kelm back for them at the weekend. He stayed at home from Australia this season to rehab a hip injury, and he ended up kicking 1-1, so he was the difference for Fermanagh at the weekend. Absolute quality. And Louth, we're getting into the Sam Maguire teams here now, are down to 18th, didn't play at the weekend. Westmeath are up to 17th. Very, very nervous win against Laois, it must be said. Meath then staying put at 16th. Limerick down to 15th. The best moment for them really at the weekend was Josh Ryan Maurice Fitzgerald style, knocking one over the bar against Kerry from the sideline, wearing Macassar gloves on one of the warmest days of the year.
Wow.
James O'Donoghue would not be happy. I haven't listened to the football pod this week, but
I think you get a free pass for if you're the Macassars.
Okay, right.
I think that's like
that's fair.
Their grandfathered in. Everything else, no.
Absolutely class, and some score as well from Josh Ryan. But I've dropped them down a place. I've actually dropped them below Clare, which may be harsh. They did beat Clare in the championship, but it was in a penalty shootout. And as we always say, who would win if the game was in the morning? And maybe Clare would have kept it to below 20 against Kerry. I don't know. But maybe that's overly harsh in Limerick. Cork then up to 13th, I guess. When we look back on the Munster Championship, they were the ones who put it up to Kerry the most, even though they had home comforts in that game. Cavan staying put at 12th. They were good at the weekend in their win against Down. Raymond Gallagher was amazing. He made 2 penalty saves in quick succession, and he also kicked 7 points.
They have to win the Tailteann Cup to justify being 12th.
Yes. Yeah,
there's no other outcome that will allow your rankings to maintain credibility.
I think the rankings are eternally credible, and nothing could ever damage the credibility.
Like the Pope, okay.
Exactly like the Pope. The power rankings.
Just as an institution,
like
your power rankings, almost. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Except no cheap imitations, which you apparently are getting everywhere these days, but go on.
Kildare are staying put at 11. I just couldn't drop them below any of those teams below them. Maybe it's too generous to them. Roscommon staying put at number 10. Armagh at number 9. Tyrone in at 8. Monaghan at 7. I'm going through all the teams that have had a couple of weeks off getting ready for the qualifiers, obviously. Monaghan at number 7. And then we got a few movers here. Donegal down to 6th. Down 3 spots, actually. They were in the top 3 before last weekend. Looking through some of the statistics of the weekends, their conversion rate was a big problem for Donegal. They actually had 32 shots compared with Derry's 26, and according to GEA Statsman, they had a 46% conversion rate compared with Derry's 65%. So that's the losing of the game for Donegal at the weekend. We can talk about the approach to the game and how Derry stopped them, and they did a brilliant job of doing that. But Donegal's conversion was very, very poor, and that's why they're down to 6, and that's why they lost the game at the weekend. Mayo staying put at number 5, and Galway breaking into the top 4 after their win at the weekend, up 2 spots to number 4.
This is the first time all season that Galway have been ahead of Mayo.
It is, and I was a little bit concerned after the win against Mayo that Roscommon would beat them in the Connacht final, and I thought that statistically when he dug into that Mayo game there was it wouldn't have taken, again, a whole pile of different things to happen for Mayo to win that game. So I just wanted another game, and they won it. And to be honest with you, it was kind of the opposite of the Mayo game, where I think Galway could have won by more in an alternate universe.
It's your internal version of XG, basically, was whatever the GAA version of that is.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The only metric that counts. Well, what's interesting now is
you call it your gaydar or something.
That's exactly it. The gaydar. The last time we had an All-Ireland final that didn't comprise of Kerry, Dublin, Mayo, Donegal, Tyrone was 2010, like 11 years ago. There's only 5 counties that have made up all of the All-Ireland since then. We've got Galway at 4, Derry at 3 this year, on the one side of the draw. This year could very well be the year.
Yeah.
I mean, Mayo could just draw one of them and go all the way to the final, of course, and Tyrone possibly could do the same thing, and that we could be back to a very similar thing.
Yeah, well, we should have had Monaghan beating Tyrone in one of those semi-finals. If the form lines coming from Ulster had held, that would have happened. I mean, Tyrone really only get in there because they won it last year, though.
Yeah,
you would have said they were an outlier up to that point.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, maybe.
Well, they got to 2018 as well, and so they've been in those finals. And I think with regards to Tyrone as well, I think that their floor is obviously quite low, and it's probably they're running around their floor at the moment, but their ceiling is also much higher than pretty much all those teams, not in the top 2 at the moment, I would think. And if we're here in a week's time and Tyrone are after beating Armagh, I think we're talking about Tyrone as potential All-Ireland finalists if they're undecided a draw that doesn't contain Kerry and Dublin. So I am holding my Jets a little bit on that just yet, but it does look very, very encouraging for Galway and Derry at the moment. And the top 3, Kerry 3, Dublin 2, Derry 2, Dublin 1. Not really joking. It's Derry 3, Dublin 2, Kerry 1. So Derry, obviously, the first team up there. A decade in which they won just one Ulster Championship game. They go back to back to back. Monaghan, Tyrone, Donegal, an incredible run from them. And like, you can talk about every different aspect of this team, management, the support that is following this team that we saw on the pitch the last day, and this looks like a team that are like a boulder rolling down a hill at the moment, and they're going to be very, very hard stopped, and I think that they will be good in Croke Park, and their style of play will be very interesting come Croke Park. Dublin staying put at number 2, and Kerry staying put at number 1. So
is the thing about Derry not that they've been able to win games in different types of ways, and that they've actually shown already that they have an attacking prowess, that we've seen them against Tyrone when they needed to rack up a score early to get out in front, they were capable of doing it, and that, like, you know, the evidence needs to be on the basis of this year and last year, that this has been a slow, steady build where they corrected any defensive issues that they might have had. They got all of their best available players, or the vast majority of their best available players, completely aligned. Like, James O'Donoghue keeps talking about Chrissy McCaig's man marking abilities, putting him in, like, in the conversation for Footballer of the Year, like a shoe in for an All-Star if there was one today, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that suddenly makes them very dangerous.
Yeah, like
in Croke Park against a good team who is like, well, we haven't seen this in a while because everybody stopped doing this. Really, everybody stopped being as good at doing this as you are at the moment.
Yeah, and I do think that, like, I mean, when we look at the last thing that people are using as a reference point for Derry, it's that Donegal team, and when they hit Croke Park, things went pretty well for them. So
it did take them a year, right? You know, I mean, they went okay that first year as well. Like, they got to a semi-final. Yeah,
they just moved the dial a little bit more in 2012 compared to 2011. They were just maybe overly defensive in 2011. That first half, obviously the notorious first half against Dublin.
Yeah, but if McFadden scores the goal he's supposed to score at the start of the second half, they win the game.
Yeah.
And they knock the Dubs out and everybody's like, wow. Do you know?
Yeah, it would have been very interesting to see what would have happened in that final. They possibly would have taken Kerry that year. Kerry, it might have been cock cold a little bit by what was actually coming from Donegal, and Donegal do beat them a year later with a relatively similar team. So maybe they get over the line initially, and maybe that's what's going to happen to Derry here. Like, as we've said, like, they've got every chance of going all the way. It's just that quarter-final draw. Getting that first win in Croke Park, I think, will be important, and if they can get a relatively forgiving draw first up in the next round, then I think they could very, very much be in the conversation. Like, you talk about all those different players that have stepped up for them over the last little while. It's like, if you're a forward who is tasked with running back or contributing to overall play, you know that you've got a massive job in your hands, whether it's McCaig, whether it's Rogers, whether it's McKinless. Somebody's going to put you on the back foot. Could Donegal have done maybe a better job to stop Michael Murphy being put on the back foot so much, as in playing closer to goal more often? Maybe, but then that system played around him. The Derry defensive system might have completely cancelled that out as well. So, like, Rory Gallagher deserves a huge amount of credit for what's happened. Like, some of the stuff that you read about him and his attention to detail in when it comes to opposition analysis is just incredible. Like, there was a great piece, I can't remember who wrote it, but the day before the day of the Monaghan game in one of the Sunday papers, there was just this anecdote that when he was with Donegal and when they beat Cork in an All-Ireland semi-final, he knew exactly what time the Cork management team would be bringing on their substitutions, and like clockwork.
I think it was Mick Foley wrote the piece.
Mick Foley wrote the piece, I think, yeah. I can't remember who came up with the anecdote, and it was just the players were like, whoa, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to opposition analysis. And I'm sure when you're working under Jim McGuinness, maybe you can focus in on that sort of stuff a little bit more. And by the sounds of things, he's surrounded himself with a backroom team that is as well equipped as what Jim McGuinness did in 10, 11, 12, or 11, 12 in particular. So that entire team, I think, deserves a lot of credit for Derry in the backroom team. And when you listen to the players talk, it's like, wow, it's almost like a mini cult. They're so in thrall of what's actually going on.
So you still have Kerry number 1?
Kerry are still number 1 for me, yeah. Like, the couple of issues.
You're getting kicked out of the Kerry Mafia. Like, yeah. As we speak, there's like your WhatsApp is pinging there. It's like it's melting down, going, what are you doing?
The thing is, like, if you were building the power rankings from scratch, would Kerry be number 1 or would Dublin be number 1? It would definitely be one of the two of them, I think. But the thing is, we've been doing these since the National League, and there's been absolutely no reason to take Kerry off the top spot. The only concern is that Kerry gained top spot because of the National League. That's a long time ago at this point.
And also because Dublin, like, were clearly not really that focused on winning the National League this year. They have some other fish that are in the frying pan right now, and they're available. They're big fish.
Yeah.
Big meaty mumfish.
I was looking at this the other day. The only time this century that Kerry have won in All Ireland without going through the back door or without a replay was 2007. So Kerry have tended to need some sort of adversity at some point. A kick up the ass. And Jack O'Connor has obviously been one of those people who has utilised the kick up the ass better than...
This is also the first time that they've had northern influence in the coaching ticket though, right?
Yeah, so you'd like to think that maybe that's... and they will surely be aware of that. Like, the thing is, what you say about that is, well, I was just going to say, the thing you'd say is that, like, you have that northern influence, which maybe, which maybe spells, like, ruthlessness. And I think Jack O'Connor's a very ruthless man himself. But Kerry have been accused of not being ruthless enough at the weekend. Like Billy Lee was saying, what I would say about Kerry is that they're always respectful of the opposition. They could have kicked another couple of goals, but they took the points. I've always known that about Kerry. They don't tattoo a team when they have them beat. They're respectful, and that's not unnoticed. And now Eoin Sheahan was asked about that on the Irish Examiner podcast yesterday, and he says that he was never asked to tattoo not to tattoo an opponent. That I don't buy into this, especially earlier on when Kerry had the goal chances and didn't take them, that they should have been taking them, that they should have been taking the goals, and the goal scoring is a bit of an issue for Kerry at the moment. So that's his point, that they didn't show that true killer instinct on Saturday, even though they won by 23 points.
I mean, first thing is, did they not? They didn't tattoo you? I think they did. There's like that. That's going to be a scarring impact for Limerick football. But that's interesting, because would if you were to pick one word to describe the Dubs in the first 25 minutes against Kildare, would like absolute tattoo, ruthless? Would that be? They had the big thing out. They were like writing their names all over.
This was not one of those like wash on tattoos.
Oh, let's be kind to. It wasn't henna. No. Let's be kind to poor Kildare. We want some opposition in Leinster for the next few years, and maybe they'll stop talking about splitting us if we just win this game by a few points. Nah, squash, squash, squash again, squash. Oh, one more, squash.
If you go back to the, what do we call it again? The GADAR, the GADAR, the Dublin's finishing, as well as that rootlessness, is just absolutely incredible. It's like a collection of Young Min Sons on the pitch, where it's like XG doesn't make any sense. Like the Cormac Costello goal, the John Small goal. Like, I mean, we all know that John Small can play. That finish was exceptional. They had 31 shots on Saturday. Kildare had 27. So only 4 more shots than Kildare.
There you go, it's close to take the goals out of it.
If you take the goals out of it, Peter Keane style, then this game, there was only a kick of a ball in it. So their efficiency has been a trademark of the great Dublin teams, and that efficiency is something that has very much been present so far in this championship. Again, the only thing is what will happen when they come up against a better team and they're in a fight for 80 minutes, because that bench is just the one thing you might have slight concerns about. Now, here's the thing, like the bench last day was Niall Scully, Cian Murphy, Aaron Byrne, Johnny Cooper, Brian O'Leary. We know that 2 of that 5 are absolutely proven. The thing is with Cian Murphy and Brian O'Leary and Aaron Byrne is that they're unproven, but that doesn't mean that they are not good players. That doesn't mean that they can't be coming to a peak this year, and it doesn't mean that they can't be shooting the lights out in A versus B games in training. So there is still very much a jury is still out nature to that bench, but that's the worst thing you can say about it. You can't really say categorically that's a bad bench or those are bad players coming on for Dublin, because they're clearly not. Dessie Farrell is clearly trusting them with minutes. Let's just see what happens now when they come up against a better team, because that's when we'll really find out how strong that bench is.
Very quickly, Mark says in McGuinness's book, he says himself he thinks Kerry would have hammered them in 11 as he felt Donegal weren't ready to face the Kerry jersey on an occasion like an All-Ireland final yet. I'm not sure that's true. I think that's the type of stuff that you put in your book and you're like, just in case we ever meet them again down the road. Shifty Lad says, good morning lads, best of luck with Try Tie Ger, wishing I could do it myself. Owen, shame. That's the opposite of the hail hail Celtic thing. Danny says the smell of them Macassars after a game, that's just the smell of yourself, Danny. Bit of self-loathing going on from the clammy, plasticky, whatever the material actually is. Is it kind of mix of polyester and elastic? And shame.
No idea. I don't know what were those things made of.
I don't know. I mean, certainly you wouldn't want them to get close to fire and be on your hands at the same time. Kenny the dad says, I won minor championships in Dublin, featured in county underage sides, then played at the top level in London for years. I now only watch hurling and the one London championship game a year. The game to me is not just as enjoyable as it once was. I can't put my finger on it, apart from Donegal's All-Ireland win. I mean, like, honestly, watching Dublin Mayo playing football over the last number of years has not been the high water mark of Irish sport. Like,
But I wonder, is that why people are, criticising what we're seeing in Ulster, is because the high water mark has been reached, and
But
when you see
what
two
drove
teams,
them on? What turned Dublin into that all-conquering super team? Donegal.
Yeah.
Donegal are like this hinge point in Irish Gaelic football history. And that only happened because of the... look. Leave it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
But what did that Donegal team do? That Donegal team did evolve into something a bit more dynamic in those later years under McGuinness.
It didn't... here's the thing. In the game against Kildare, in the first game that they won, which is in 11 in the quarter-final, their cornerbacks are up in the right corner forward position, overlapping at various stages. They just hadn't perfected it yet, because it was we're doing something better and new and evolutionary, and this is how things change, because they had good games that they could measure themselves in the championship against. Nobody else has that. Like, you can't see an evolution of Kerry's football style beyond a few games in the league and then an All-Ireland quarter-final, because there's nothing for them. Everything comes back to structures. You fix the structures and then come back to me with the game's boring. Anyway, 11 minutes past 8. A reminder, the Football Pod, live. Paddy Andrews, James O'Donoghue and special guests. Go to the Royal Theatre in Castlebar on Thursday, June the 2nd. That's next Thursday, in celebration of Mayo football. I mean, obviously I mean Thursday week, but you know what I mean. It's next week and Thursday. It's also a look at the championship race and so much more. So they'll preview in detail the Mayo Monaghan game, but they'll also tell you about whether or not Owen's power rankings are correct and anything you want them to talk about. That's the thing. They're live and in glorious Technicolor. The Football Pod live in Castlebar Thursday, June 2nd. Tickets are on sale now. Go to otbsports.com/events to get yours today. Stay tuned to OTB for more details on more shows to come.